Welcome to the Sunday Shelfie. I'm Niki, the Obsessive Bookseller, and today we are on week three? Yes, 3 of 9 in my young adult and middle grade section. And this week we are continuing with a lot of the stuff that I've already read before, which in some ways is a lot more fun to film than the stuff that I haven't read, because I'm not constantly saying, oh yeah, I'd like to get around to that one day. Oh yeah, I really want to read that. Oh yeah, I'd like to read that. I want to make time for that. I feel like a broken record, but at least with the read stuff, I can just talk about the content. But on the flip side, the unread stuff, it's really fun to see what we've got like undiscovered on those shelves, because I forgot what I have. It's been a while since I've kind of really maintained and been through this section, so kind of reinvigorates my excitement for what I have not explored yet in my collection. Anyway, let's go look at some books.
Okay, starting off right away with my Harry Potter collection. It's kind of interesting. When I very first started reading the series, it felt like a solo event. And then, it had gained a lot of traction by book 3, and then by book 4, I at least knew a couple other people who had read it. There was a long gap between releases between these two, and I was working as a bookseller when these came out and worked the release date parties. It was equal parts very stressful but very fun. I ran the trivia booth at one of them, and trying to manage that many people in that tiny a store, oh my gosh. I did bring home a lot of fun swag. And I have this really cool sealed special artwork edition. And honestly, I think I got it for free. I thought, might as well hang on to that. And then this book. It was out for about 2 months before it got in trouble for some sort of copyright infringement. Oh yes, not approved by J.K. Rowling and Warner Brothers. So it got yanked off the shelves and returned, but I had already bought one. So yay, one of a kind. And it's actually a pretty decent little quiz book. Not really obscure things, stuff you might actually remember from the stories. And then we have my copy of Skyward. Even though I like the brightness of the purple, and even the newest one is kind of like a bright pink, I think I do prefer the UK covers for these. I really like the first one.
This one I didn't love so much. It felt really immature to me. I think it was the dynamics between her and the other characters, and the dialogue felt just so juvenile. I did not enjoy it. There were enough cool plot points at the end to make me want to continue the story to see where it goes, but I have a copy of the third one, and I'm really in no rush to pick it up. I'll probably wait until the fourth one comes out, and then kind of read everything in a sweep. But yeah, first book was amazing. The second book knocked my enthusiasm away. My copy of Steelheart. This series gets a lot of criticism, but I really liked it. I think it'd be a perfect pick to give to a teen who's hesitant to get into reading. It's got that superhero aspect, very accessible writing, a really fun storyline, and I quite liked it. The first 2 books were solid for me, whereas this third book felt kind of convoluted and all over the place. It almost felt like a rushed novel. I liked where it ended. The ending saved it, but yeah, I did not enjoy that one as much as I thought I would. And then the Rhythmist. I saw my own review for this yesterday. Someone liked it randomly. It had been 10 years since I read it. It feels like that long anyway. But I rated this one really highly. I loved the magic system in it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's a school setting, and in that school you get to learn about the magic. It's got lots of illustrations in it, and I think it was an absolute delight. A lot more sophisticated than most middle grade books you'll read, I'll tell you that for sure. Scythe by Neil Schusterman. This is one of the few that I've read within the last couple of years. I liked this one. It had a really interesting plot, and I love the psychology behind it, trying to figure out what the motives of these reapers were, and the different ways they all deal with having to kill people for a living. It was really good. It was also one of the few that didn't focus very much on a love story. A lot of people have said his Unwind series is even better. I've read this one and the second one, and I have not yet read the third one, but pretty good book. Rush. This is a cool book. It's kind of like a virtual reality, but when you're in there, you're actually fighting aliens that exist. So they kind of exist in this other realm, and you've got to go in and, like, SWAT team and kill them. So I thought that was a freaking cool concept for a book. It had a lot of action. It was really fun. And then the second book happened, and all of the cool world building and plot ideas were secondary to the relationship development. And it was like a bait and switch. We started out with something a little edgier and then ended up with, I mean, just every single passage was this girl wondering about this boy and thinking about him and talking about him, and I just couldn't do it. Even though I really like the idea, I never finished the trilogy. We've got Help Me, I'm Trapped in Obedience School Again. This is one of the few when I was a kid, stuck in Oak City, Utah, with no new books in my fingertips. I read dozens and dozens of times, so many times. And then eventually figured out that there were more than one book in the series. So eventually went through and bought and read all of them much later. But yeah, love that one. Really fun. Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I should like this one a lot more than I did. I should want to read on a lot more than I have. It's a really exotic and well done concept, great characters. It has a love story, but it wasn't overblown. I even own the second book, but I just never made time to read it. Definitely see why so many people hold it in high regard. The only thing I can think of, there were chimera in the story, and I have a really hard time with chimera. It feels like a cop-out, like, oh, well, let's just take a rhinoceros and mix it together with a peacock, and then we got a new critter. Yeah, I don't know, I think they're kind of stupid, and so it took away the seriousness of the story for me a bit, and I'm not sure I totally connected with the main character. All Our Yesterdays by Kristen Terrell. It's a time travel novel, and normally they don't work for me. Whenever I can see anything in a time travel book that might be a plot hole, it really bothers me, and I can't let it go. So it's really hard to do well. This one I thought was done pretty well. It put this author on the map for me, so I ended up adding a whole bunch of other stuff that she wrote to my TBR, but have yet to read anything by it. But I did really like that one. Reboot by Amy Tintera. Both of my copies are signed. This one was an awesome book, a really cool idea. I've only read a few of these, like reanimated after they died kind of books, but I like this one quite a bit. The second one was even quite good. So yeah, for a little duology, one of the stronger ones I read. Really enjoyed it. Don't remember much about it at this point, but I wouldn't be opposed to rereading it. Just a cute little middle grade book by Bill Wallace. He always writes about animals and they're always adorable. This one's called Up Chuck and the Rotten Willy. And my favorite part about them are the illustrations. I think they are so freaking cute. Oh, speaking of reanimation, Skinned by Robin Wasserman. This was pretty edgy. I liked it a lot. I love this tiny hardcover format. Made it really fun to read. I read this one once, liked it, bought the whole series, and then eventually went back and reread it again so I could continue. I did continue, liked the second one, but then never picked up the third one. So I said, screw it, I'm not rereading it again, and here I sit, still having not read the third one. The Uglies series by Scott Westerfeld. This was one of the first young adult books I ever picked up, and I was completely absorbed. I thought it was so cool. Such a good idea for a story, so eerily plausible as well. And I think it's one of the few I would find a lot of insight rereading to this day. I really liked it. And then the extras came out, and I liked this book, but then the way it ended was so open-ended that I was pissed that it was a standalone. And then years and years later, like over 10 years later, he finally comes out with another book in the series. But it had been so long, I'm like, I don't care anymore. Yeah, I don't reread books very often, but if I do, I might pick this one just so I can continue and see where he goes with it. The Partials by Dan Wells. I drove 4 hours to get my collection signed by him. There was a point in time where this was my all-time favorite young adult book. Of all the post-apocalyptic ones, I thought this one was done so well. And the second and third books were pretty decent as well. I really liked his writing style. I've since read quite a few that I think I like a little bit better, but this one will always hold a pretty decent place for me. And we've got like the second and third books here, all of them signed. Django Wexler, Ship of Smoke and Steel. I'm actually currently reading his Thousand Names book, the first book in his Shadow League campaign series. This was a decent young adult book, slightly edgier than I'm used to. I like the main character, I like the plot, I like the storyline. Oddly enough, it was a little too romance heavy for me. It seems a little bizarre that that would be the case, but I liked it enough to pick up the next two, but I just haven't gotten around to reading them yet. And truthfully, I'd probably have to reread this one before continuing. The Poison Diaries by Mary Rose Wood. Fun little book. I thought it stood pretty well as a standalone, but evidently there's a second book out. But you know those books that say they're about poisoners and assassination, but then nothing ever happens with it? I do remember out of this one, at least you got to learn about the poison making. It was like pretty integral to the plot, and I thought that was pretty cool. The Enchanted Forest Chronicles. Not only do I love this series, I love the cute little format that they came in. Like really fun little books to read. If you're in the mood for something really well written, but also very delightful, very short, feel-good books, then I highly recommend this series of 4. I also have a hardcover of it here. I read these pretty young, and I absolutely loved them. And then there's this cute little book of short stories, Book of Enchantments. This one was a really good read as well. I don't normally like short stories. I loved everything in there. So this is a funny story. The book Flipped by Wendelin Van Dranen. I was a brand new, bright-eyed bookseller when I was 16 and really respected one of the ladies that I worked with at the little B. Dalton bookstore. Like, she was so cool. I looked up to her quite a bit. And she mentioned that she had read a book that she really loved, and all I had remembered was that it had a upside-down bird on the cover. And so I saw this and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll give that a go, and read it. And it's just like a little teen romance book, nothing to write home about. And I told her I read it, and she goes, oh, that's not the one that I had held up. And it turns out it was some like really hardcore fiction, like Kurt Vonnegut or something. I can't remember which title, but it was in that same vein. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I wanted to be edgy, and I thought this was a little bubblegum, but I was going to read it anyway. It was really funny. But, you know, pretty fun book. The Castle in the Attic. I talked about this one in my personal canon video. I was in these little reading groups in middle school, and this is one of the stories that the teacher chose for us to read. And I loved it. It was so absorbing. The castle is a portal to an actual fantasy realm that this kid goes to visit. And the first book was good. The second book was incredible. I loved it so much. It really spurred my love for that type of fantasy, and I went on to read a lot of like Feist and Terry Brooks and all that because of this series. And so I'm really grateful, because normally they have you read really boring old classics in school, but we got something fun. And it did what it was supposed to with me, spurred my love of reading. Very highly praise those. I have The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. The first book was awesome. Such a cool story, such a cool idea. It's post-apocalyptic, but with aliens. Loved it so much. The second book was okay. I think this is the third one. Yep, this is the third book. And unfortunately, like all of the promises, all of the cool things that you can't wait to find out more about that were introduced in the third one, I don't feel were explored well enough, oddly. So the shape that the story took did not satisfy me at all. I kind of rushed through the last book because I was just over it at that point. it didn't deliver on anything that I was hoping it would. I feel like the first book, if it had been a standalone and kind of resolved itself at the end, would have been one of the strongest things I've ever read. But as it stands, to make more money, they pushed it out, and the rest of them weren't that good. Dragon's Blood by Jane Yolen. The idea for this story is so freaking cool. It's called the Pit Dragon Trilogy. On Mars, they fight dragons in the pit, and so this is like kind of a care and keeping of those dragons, and some really cool plot around that whole idea. I loved it so much. The second, third, and fourth books, I absolutely hated. I feel like every single interesting plot point that she could have expanded on, she ignored completely and kind of went off on these random tangents for a story, and I was not satisfied with it at all. I ended up unhauling them. I didn't like them that much, even though I really love these little covers. But the first book, you consider it a standalone. Pretty darn good. Part of the reason why this tour is going to be a little bit shorter today is because I have an entire bookshelf here of the Animorph series. I have read these books so many times that I ended up like rebuying versions of the first one. I learned to typing out this particular story on our computer, and then went to computer class like 4 years later and got all my work done within the first month, so spent the rest of the semester playing games on the computer. But this series was so important to me as a kid. I loved it so much. I still love it. I've reread the first several quite a few times. I used to take summer days and read 3 of them. Anyway, if you're unfamiliar with them, an alien crash lands on Earth and gifts these kids the ability to morph into any animal that they can absorb the DNA from. And the whole purpose is to fight these parasite aliens that have already invaded Earth. It's really well done. I love anything to do with animals. I thought the use of the morphing powers was really prevalent throughout the series, so she delivered on all those promises. The series was strong. I believe book 12 was my favorite book, but I like them all for different reasons. I loved absolutely everything about it until we hit, what is this, book 22. And then from there, she started getting ghostwriters, and you can definitely tell they're still great books. They still have a lot of fun, and obviously I don't remember them as well as the earlier books because about the time the series hit about this point, I moved down to where I had access to a bookstore where I could start buying a whole bunch of books. I was getting into more adult fantasy at that point, and so read the first 22 or so of them a million times, and then only read the rest of the series once to finish it out. My library has actually recently purchased all of the audiobooks for this, and while it wouldn't take me that long to sit and read one of them, like under an hour, I think it would be fun to go through a book a day while I'm doing other things and make my way through the series again, because I have vague impressions of the rest of the series, but I don't remember these specific books. So, yep, very cherished series for me. I will always have a shrine, and I can't wait until I can share them with my kids. So that wraps up today's tour. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the tour. Thank you so much for coming along, especially those of you who are watching the content, even though YA isn't your jam, because I know got a lot of people just supporting the channel for the sake of supporting, and I really appreciate that. If you find one title out of this whole series that you're interested in picking up, then I will consider it a success. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this tour, and I hope to catch you next time.